Imagine the herd you'd been tracking for 3 days just vanished. No tracks, no droppings, nothing. The berries near camp are already stripped bare. The rivers run low this season and the fish aren't coming. Your last real meal was 4 days ago. This isn't a hypothetical. For most of human history, this wasn't a rare disaster. It was a recurring, predictable part of the year. And the difference between a group that survived it and one that didn't came down to a handful of strategies, refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Today, when you're hungry, you open an app or walk to a fridge that's never actually empty. Food scarcity isn't something most people alive today have ever truly experienced. But for nearly all of human existence, there was no backup system. When the food ran out, it just ran out, and your body started eating itself within days. So what did they actually do? The first strategy was preservation, turning today's surplus into tomorrow's survival. One of the most sophisticated examples is pemmican, a mixture of pounded dried meat and rendered animal fat, developed by indigenous peoples of North America. The fat wasn't just added for calories. It sealed the meat from air and moisture, creating an environment hostile to bacteria. Properly made, it could last for years without spoiling, roughly 3,000 calories into a single pound. This wasn't a backup snack. It was a hedge against a season with no guaranteed food at all. Smoking, drying, and fat-sealing meat like this shows up independently across nearly every hunter-gatherer culture on every continent, which tells you something. This wasn't a lucky invention one group stumbled on. It was a problem serious enough that people kept solving it over and over everywhere humans lived. The second strategy was falling back on foods nobody wanted to eat first. Roots, bark, insects, lichen, low-preference, labor-intensive foods that took real effort to make edible, but that stayed available even when preferred game and plants disappeared. Groups didn't touch these foods when times were good. They were the last resort, the buffer between hunger and starvation, and knowing exactly which ones were safe versus toxic was knowledge passed down with real weight behind it. Get it wrong and the fallback food could kill you faster than the famine. The third strategy was movement. When a region's food collapsed, groups didn't wait it out. They left, sometimes covering enormous distances, to reach areas where the season had been kinder. This required something easy to overlook: a network. Knowing which distant groups might have surplus, which routes were safe, which territories to avoid. Isolated groups, with nowhere to go and no one to call on, had far fewer options when a bad season hit. And here's the part that most people don't expect. Famine leaves a permanent signature on the human body. One archaeologist can still read today. When a growing child goes through a period of severe malnutrition, bone growth briefly stops. When food returns and growth resumes, it leaves behind a faint, dense band inside the long bones called a Harris line, a kind of internal tree ring marking exactly when the body went through a period of starvation. Skeletons showing multiple Harris lines tell researchers a person survived several serious famine events in childhood alone. It's evidence carved directly into the skeleton of a crisis the person lived through and walked away from. But here's where it gets more interesting than pure survival. Famine didn't just test individuals, it tested social bonds. Groups that shared food during a bad season, even when it meant less for themselves, tended to be the ones whose members survived to have children of their own. Selfishness during a famine might win in the short term, but it tends to end the family line. Generosity, strangely, was often the more successful survival strategy. Not because it felt good, but because it kept the whole network alive long enough to help you back during your own bad season. So when the food ran out, ancient humans didn't just endure it. They built systems around the certainty that it would happen again, preserved fat and meat that could outlast a season, knowledge of last resort foods passed down with care, networks of distant allies to call on, and a culture of sharing that, over enough generations, quietly outcompeted selfishness. The bones of the people who lived through it are still telling the story, one faint line at a time.